Yeah.
There's going to be about a 5-minute delay. We're setting another room up with television, and that's what the town manager's working on right now. So just bear with us for 5 minutes, and we'll get the show underway.
Betty, because our meeting is also running at the same time, you want to keep track of everything else that's going on? Much as you can. Okay, all right.
Before, not only horses, you know, we also Nalto and Susan are my brothers-in-laws. So they're Nalto up here, they put in off.
Half the people haven't been able to see that presentation.
I don't know. I'm wondering if they can televise it too. I hope so.
Can't get that TV running out fast, so I think the best we can do is
Just have them stand on the back or at the doors. Okay.
I can't change the
Had a little more space over by the flag.
I'll change this chair temperature. Knock it down outside.
Good idea.
Tell Sharon it's not going to work. Is those shatterproof?
These are amazing. You know, check these out. They're with triple hinges.
Oh, yeah.
So you can really active lifestyle.
Yeah.
Constantly, you know, if you hang them down like this in the yard.
Good evening, everyone. How we doing? I have one word for this night. Wow. I am Wayne Berry. I'm Vice President of Board of Trustees for the Kennebunk Light and Power District. We have a meeting. We have a meeting going on right now of our board. We will be continuing that. The Board of Selectmen will be joining us shortly. If we do not have the ability to broadcast the TV in the other room, so you guys are going to have to crowd in the back, in the corners, in the doors, wherever you want. I thank you all for coming. This is a pleasant surprise. And I guess we'll turn it over to Kevin. Let their board convene.
Thank you, Wayne. I'll call the special meeting of the Kennebunk Board of Selectmen to order on the 31st day of March. Would you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a very large crowd tonight, so please bear with us. If you can keep the conversations down, that way everyone will be able to hear a little bit better. We have the folks here from the Kennebunk Light and Power that are here to discuss the river modeling report. So to get on with that, I'll introduce Todd Shea. Last time I saw Todd, he was the town manager over in Arundel. We've been to a few meetings together. So Todd, if you would, to introduce your folks and go ahead and start your presentation.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out tonight. I don't think the microphone's going to cover the room, so I'm just going to speak as loudly as possible. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right, thank you. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls. Thank you very much for the turnout. I didn't anticipate the need for the boys and girls, but welcome. On behalf of Kennebunk Light and Power District Board of Trustees, I'd like to thank the members of the Kennebunk Board of Selectmen, our customers, community members, and other interested parties for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us tonight for this informational meeting. My name is Todd Shea, and I'm the General Manager of Kennebunk Light and Power District. I'd like to thank the Board of Trustees for selecting me to replace Sharon Staz, outgoing General Manager, who will be retiring in June after 17 years of dedicated service to the district, our ratepayers, and the community. Thank you, Sharon, for your assistance with my transition into this position. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you.
I began this position with the district 2 months ago. And in that time, I've had the ability to come up to speed on many different factors involved in the decisions that the board and our customers will have to face in the years to come, including the potential relicensing of our FERC license to operate. There's a lot of information for the board to process in this decision, and I can assure you that the board is performing their due diligence on each of the options that they are faced with. No stone is being left unturned, and no assumptions will be made that would lead to an uninformed choice. My responsibility in this process is not to make the decision for the Board of Trustees or the district. It's to ensure the board has the information that they need to make the decision that addresses all the concerns associated with that decision in the best interest of the future of the district. It's the board's responsibility to guide the district through this process and make the right choice for the future of our ratepayers and the community. I hope you all found the sign-up sheet circulating around the room outside this evening. I apologize, we did have handouts, didn't have nearly enough handouts. This information will be posted on the district's website. You can email me and I can send you an electronic copy of the presentation that you're going to see this evening. I apologize for not anticipating this great of a turnout. For those of you who have not provided us with your email address in the past, please take a moment to fill in your information so we can keep you abreast of news and information as it is made available to the public. This presentation is being streamed live on the Town of Kennebunk website and will also be broadcast on your local public access station, Channel 5. Thank you for the Town of Kennebunk for providing us with the service and for the use of the room tonight. Also be sure to check our district's website, www.klpd.org, for more information on this process. We'll upload a link to this presentation as well as a copy of the text of this presentation to our website as soon as it is available, meaning when I get back to the office. If you have friends, neighbors, or know of other interested parties who are not able to join us tonight, we ask that you please direct them to these sources. The Board of Trustees would like this information to be distributed through as many channels as possible for maximum public engagement throughout this process. In order to ensure that we have the ability to get through the entire presentation tonight, we ask that you hold all of your questions and comments until the end of the presentation, and I thank you in advance for being respectful of that request. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to give you an overview of the process that the district is working through in regards to the 3 hydro generation sites along the Mousom River. To date, no decisions have been made on any of the different options, and the board has been gathering and processing information that will allow them to best decide on the future of the dams in a manner that is in the best interest of the district, its ratepayers, and the community. The district continues to maintain and operate the 3 hydro generation facilities in a safe and efficient manner, with approximately 1 to 5% of our power needs being provided by those renewable generation facilities. Our hydro sites are run of the river, so generation is at the mercy of Mother Nature and what she sends to us. Since the KLPD Board of Trustees met with the community last in July of 2013, a lot of research has been done. This evening, we will be sharing with you the results of the river modeling and photo simulations that Wright Pierce Engineering has prepared for the district. In a few minutes, I'll turn the presentation over to Patricia McIlvain of Wright Pierce, who will help to explain the results of the study to you. I cannot overemphasize that there have been no decisions made to date on any of the options that the Board of Trustees and the district are faced with. No decision has been made on whether or not to remove the dams or to keep them in place on the Mousom. The reason that this report is available to us at this point is simply timing. Last fall, in conjunction with our annual inspection of the dams and the replacement of a floodgate at Kesselin, the district engaged the services of Wright Pierce to perform the river modeling and photo simulation that we will present to you. Anytime that the district is required to draw down the impoundment, which is the storage area behind the dams, we have 3 of them, all of approximately 25 acres here in Kennebunk. Anytime that we're required to draw them down, several interested parties need to be informed at the federal, state, and local levels. The Board of Trustees felt that the drawdown last fall provided the opportunity for Wright Pierce to do the necessary surveys and gather the necessary data to try and gain a better understanding of what a free-flowing Mousom River from Kesselin to above Dane Perkins, the district's furthest upstream impoundment, would look like. Tonight, we will share those results with you. As the Board of Trustees navigates through this process, there are several considerations that must be made. The main question that is being considered as part of this very involved process is what course of action is in the best interest of all of the district's ratepayers. That decision will be made based upon the best possible balance of the needs of the district's customers, residents of the town of Kennebunk, and the various interest groups that have expressed their interest in improving the health of the Mousom River. To date, the Mousom-Kennebunk River Alliance, Maine Rivers, and the Sierra Club Maine chapter have been very vocal in their desired outcome. The Board of Trustees and I appreciate the interest and passion of these groups and would also like to hear the thoughts and desires of other interested groups and members of the community as we move forward. Our license to generate power expires 7 years from today, March 31st, 2022. By March 31st of 2017, Kennebunk Light and Power District is required to file a notice of intent with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on what course of action will be taken in regards to our hydro sites. Please check the district's website for meeting dates and times. All district meetings are open to the public, but on occasion, closed executive sessions will be held as sensitive information is received. Please keep in mind that no decisions are made in executive sessions. Should the information discussed in executive session need to be acted upon, the board is required to motion to come out of that executive session to take action. Examples of information that the board may consider during these sessions would be legal advice from the district's attorney or information that, if discussed publicly, could compromise the confidentiality of the information. Executive sessions are not the norm, but will be used when needed. The district will continue to work with state and federal agencies, as well as the various non-governmental organizations who have expressed interest in the process as we move forward. The district will also hold future public information sessions such as this one, as information comes available to disseminate to the public. Once again, please provide us with your name and email address on the sign-in sheet provided this evening if you would like to be informed of upcoming meetings and decisions. The district's website is also a good place to seek information, and we will update it with new information as soon as it is available. There are several alternatives that the Board of Directors is considering in regards to our hydro generation facilities on the Mousom River. As stated previously, the district has 3 facilities on the river: Kesselin Dam, which can be seen from the Route 1 bridge near the Lafayette Center; Twine Mill Dam, which is located adjacent to the former Twine factory off Twine Mill Road in West Kennebunk; and Dane Perkins Dam, which is located on Mill Street in West Kennebunk. By March 31st, 2017, Kennebunk Light and Power District is required to file a notice of intent with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as to the fate of the 3 sites. Should the FERC retain jurisdiction over our generation facilities, there are several different paths that the district can take. In the event that the district decides to continue generating at the sites beyond March 31st, 2022, some options that will be considered and potentially mandated would be environmental enhancements such as upstream and downstream fish passage. Costs associated with these environmental enhancements are being refined as part of the Board of Trustees' due diligence in this process. All 3 facilities, or any subset of the 3, may be considered to remain in operation. Efficiencies to the current units and enhancements to increase power generation at the facilities are also being looked at, with the end result being what is in the best interest of the ratepayers and the district as a whole. The district may ultimately decide that it is not in the best interest to continue operating at these sites, and costs associated with potential dam removal or other environmental enhancements necessary at the sites that no longer generate power are also being compiled. In a moment, we will touch upon options to sell or lease the sites, which is something that the board sought interest in late 2014. One purpose of this evening's meeting is to open up a conversation with the public regarding the Mousom River. The Board of Trustees is looking for an understanding of the community value of our sites. Whether or not the public sees these sites as having historical significance in the town, what the recreational value of the impoundments are as they exist, and what effects changes to those impoundments would have on different groups in the community. The Board of Trustees is also considering other sources of renewable generation for the district, such as a potential distributed generation solar array within our system, which would provide another source of green power to our customers. Once you've had a chance to digest the results of the river modeling and photo simulation presented this evening, I ask that you please reach out to me by phone, 985-3311, email at tshay@klpd.org, that's how you spell Shay, or via U.S. mail at 4 Factory Pasture Lane in Kennebunk to let us know your thoughts. Any information and thoughts provided will be passed on to the Board of Trustees and utilized in the decision-making process. Your opinion does matter, and that I ask that you do not hesitate to provide it to us. In the summer of 2014, an RFP was sent to interested parties to gauge if there was any interest from independent firms in purchasing or leasing our sites. Preliminary due diligence documents were provided to the respondents, and site visits were performed by 4 companies. As of August 2014, none had expressed continued interest. But in the event that a firm would surface that was interested, the board would more than likely consider that option once again. I will now turn the presentation over to Pat McIlvaine of Wright Pierce Engineering for the results of the river modeling and photo simulation that her firm performed. Once again, we ask that you hold all questions to the end of the presentation when question and comments will be permitted. Thank you very much for your time and your patience, and once again, I apologize for the delay in starting this meeting.
Okay, now we're set. Moving on to the next slide. So my name is Pat McIlvaine. I'm with Wright Pierce. We're an engineering firm that has been hired by KLPD to help them with a number of different studies. The particular study we're talking about tonight, let me go back here, is the river modeling study that we did that would help us understand what the river might look like should the dams be removed. When we did the river modeling, and as Todd mentioned, we took advantage of the lowering of the impoundment behind the Kesselin Dam so that we can actually, when we were doing our survey, we actually took cross-sections, went out in a boat with a surveyor on, we had a surveyor on land to take survey points to understand the contour of the river bottom. We also used a series of contour information from FEMA. But FEMA's data basically is limited to what the shoreline looks like. but that does help us understand the width of the river. And the purpose of this modeling is that you can then see if the dams are removed, what the width of the river may look like and what the depth of the river would look like. And when we did the modeling, we actually looked at basically the July summer flows. All this flow data was actually obtained from USGS gauging station in West Kennebunk. And it was a number of years starting in 1939 through 2013 that we used the data. And we elected to use the July data because if you want to think about it, it's when the water is lowest. So it would show what it would look like in a most drawn down situation. During spring flows, the river would be wider and the river would be deeper. So around the room, we do have the same information that I'll be showing on a slide presentation that shows what each cross-section looks like and what we did photo simulations at specific locations of what it might look like. It shows what it looks like with the dams there, what it might look like shortly a few weeks after the dams would be removed, and then perhaps 2 to 3 years later. Because as time goes by, vegetation will naturally start coming in and restoring the shoreline. When we did the modeling, we actually looked at 3 scenarios. One scenario looked at removing all 3 dams. One scenario, and then we looked at the other scenarios of removing just Kesslin, then Twine Mill, and Dane Perkins. The slide here, and I'm sorry for the folks I'm blocking your view, but it basically shows an example of a river profile. Basically showing that right now behind the dam, you have deeper water. You have an impoundment, or some people refer to them as lakes. However, once the dam is removed, you're then going to be restored to a more normal river condition, where that level will be down, even to the river bottom. The river modeling results, and it said, we have this information posted around the wall for those who cannot see this. The river modeling results basically show what the existing width is, with all dams removed, Twine Mill and Dane Perkins removed, and only Dane Perkins removed. I realize that you cannot read the numbers on the slide, but when you do receive a copy of the handout, you will be able to see those. I will tell you that the results of the modeling, when we looked at all dams removed or removing just the Twine Mill and Dane Perkins, that for the most part, the results were the same. The difference we had is only at Dane Perkins Dam. At Dane Perkins Dam, if you removed both Twine Mills and Dane Perkins, what would remain at the former location of the Dane Perkins Dam would be different. It would actually be a little bit deeper and a little bit wider than if you removed just the Dane Perkins Dam. And the difference would be, it would be roughly 18 feet wide and 1.8 feet deep if you removed Twine Mill and Dane Perkins, and 34 feet wide and 4.4 feet deep if you remove just Dane Perkins. And the reason is that once the Dane Perkins Dam is removed, but say you maintain the Twine Mill Dam, the impoundment behind there actually stretches upstream beyond where the current Dane Perkins Dam is. So what we did is we went and decided, where can we do these photo simulations? Certainly we selected each of the dam locations as one location to do the photo simulation. We selected the other locations based on where there's access to see a riverfront from land. We did not do photo simulations as though you were in a boat. So we using Google Earth, we went and looked along to see where people would actually have riverfront views. And from that, we selected Sayward Street, Partridge Lane, as I mentioned, Kesslin Dam, and Yankee Land Campground. We looked at Yankee Land Campground also because they do have canoe access for campers from there. So we also have a photo simulation of what it would look like if the dams are removed and how that would impact Yankee Land Campground. So at the Kesselin Dam, and again, I'll just reiterate, all this information is posted on walls, so after the meeting, if you want to take a look at that, you can see the same information. At Kesselin Dam, with the dam, the water is 14 feet. If all the dams are removed, the water drops down to roughly 1.2 feet. And again, I'll remind you that this is during summer flows. This is the month of July. So again, after rainstorms, during normal spring conditions when there's a lot more water in the river channel will be wider and it will be deeper. But we elected to do it using July flows, so you get a sense of, and I hate to use worst case situation, but it's where there's the biggest change. And so there's a change of 12.8 feet in the depth of the water. In terms of the width of the river with the dam is approximately 128 feet wide. And when you remove all the dams, the width of the river is reduced to about 40 feet. We have a slide that shows the existing Kesselin Dam, that as you would see it as you were walking across the bridge. And then a few weeks later, we did a photo simulation of the dam removed. It's a little bit of art and it's a little bit of science. The science part is the river modeling to say what depth of water might you expect, and perhaps how wide of the river might you expect. But we show rocks in the river. We anticipate that there are. Do we know they're exactly there? No, we don't. But if you look downstream of the Kesselin Dam, you look at what the Mousom River looks like, it gives you an impression of what it would look like. Also, when the dam is first removed, there will be sediments left behind. We do not know exactly how deep the sediments are behind a dam. That's a natural occurrence when you have a dam. As sediments move downstream, they do collect behind the dam. So initially, a lot of those sediments will be obvious during the first couple of weeks. And then, quite frankly, it's up to Mother Nature how quickly those sediments might move. Now, if this option were selected and any of these dams were to be removed, KLPD would be obligated to test the sediments to see if in fact there's any contamination. And those sediments would have to be removed and disposed of. Contaminated sediments are not allowed to just flush downstream. Before anybody started thinking about that, I just thought I would add that. Then 2 to 4 years out, different types of vegetation is going to grow up where there was sediments and soil buildup. Exactly what's going to grow there, we don't know. Certainly grasses are going to start and shrubby vegetation will then take over. Whether or not it'll ever develop into trees, there's a good chance it would not, primarily because, some of that is going in high stream flows would be washed over. And, different types of trees don't like that type of changing water condition, whereas different vegetation is more suitable to that would grow in these areas. At Twine Mill location, and I will tell you that we have more photo simulations on the walls than I'm showing here tonight. At the Twine Mill, right now with the dam, the water is roughly 18.8 feet deep, and the river is about 196 feet wide. With all the dams removed, the depth of the water goes down to about 1.9 feet, almost 2 feet of water. So that's a change of almost 17 feet in water depth. The river width would be reduced to about 33 feet from 196 feet. And so therefore the change is approximately 163 feet, the change in the width of the river. Again, the photo simulation of this actually isn't photos, this is an actual photograph of the Twine Mill Dam. And I will tell you that it was difficult for us to get a location where the public could see what the area would look like. And the photo simulations are important for how the public would view it. So we selected this location as a possible location, recognizing that a lot of the area right along the impoundment for security reasons has fencing for KLPD's purposes, so the public really couldn't access it anyway. Again, a few weeks later, there would be sediment left behind, similar to Kesslin. We don't know how much sediment would be there, but in fact, sediment would remain. Certainly, as spring flows change, depending on, and again, if the dams were to be removed, we don't know what season it would happen, but certainly spring flows would start moving those sediments downstream in a similar fashion that Mother Nature does. And again, 2 to 3 years out, you would have, the rocky areas within the river would remain, and you'd start getting the herbaceous and shrubby vegetation growing along the shorelines. Dane Perkins. With the dams, the depth of the water is 17.5 feet, and the width is 133 feet. With the dams removed, that water drops down to about 1.9 feet, which is a change in depth of about 15.6 feet. In terms of the river width, it drops to about 19.5 feet, which is a reduction of about 113.5 feet. Again, Dane Perkins, as it stands today. Dane Perkins, a few weeks later. I'm sorry, it's hard to see. And 2 to 3 years out. And again, you will start getting that same type of vegetation. That's the end of the presentation of the river modeling that we did and the photo simulations. As I mentioned, we also did these for Sayward Street, Partridge Lane, and Yankee Campground, and those are posted on the wall. The same information, it shows the change in river width and depth and the different stages of what it may look like should the dams be removed. They're posted on the wall. Okay, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Todd. Thank you very much.
They are not yet posted on our website. Tomorrow morning they will be posted on the Hydro page. And if you sign up for the email alerts, I can email PDF copies of that to you as well. But we will upload those, and there will be a video of this presentation on our website in the morning. Vice President Berry, at your pleasure, I would like to open this first up to questions from the Board of Selectmen and then to the public. Any questions from the Kennebunk Board of Selectmen?
Questions or comments?
Or comments?
Right off, a concern I have is the, is the sediment, if one or all of the dams were removed. I think it's fair to guess that there's quite a bit of sediment behind each one of those dams because they've been there for a long time. So what happens when you go in there with an excavator or dynamite or whatever and breach the dam? The initial rush of water, of course, I'm sure you're not going to let it all go at once, but it's going to carry all that sediment away, all the loose sediment. What is that sediment going to do? And hopefully it's not polluted, but I kind of doubt it. But what's that going to do to the rest of the river between the bridge next to Duffy's and the ocean? Is that going to wash all the way to the ocean, or is it going to disperse itself along the river between here and there and thus hide some of the rocks that are there now? Do we know what really happens?
Our understanding, it could be a combination of both of the things you just said, Selectman Searles. Mother Nature sends flow to the river in varying capacities. It's been indicated that the heavy events such as Mother's Day and Patriots' Day of 2006 caused flushing events in the river itself. If the decision were made to remove the dams, yes, we would have to test the sediment because no contaminated sediment would be allowed to filter downstream.
Would it be tested prior to breaching the dam?
Would be tested prior to breaching the dam. And then at that point, further modeling would have to be done to determine where that sediment is going to deposit itself and what problems that's going to cause further down the watershed.
Have there been any studies done regarding the type and how many fish come up the Kennebunk River from the Kesslin Dam up through?
Selectman Spofford, the fish don't go up the Kennebunk River to the Kesselin Dam. Sorry, I had to. The Mousam,
I'm
none
sorry.
of them go up the
I live
Kennebunk
on the
River.
Kennebunk River.
The Mousam River to the dam, there have been no definitive studies. We've had preliminary meetings with different state agencies, such as the Department of Marine Resources and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. But until such time as we file our notice of intent, full surveys won't be done to determine what species are trying to get where. The only thing that we are aware of is that there are American eel throughout the entire watershed.
So if you as a board decided not to do anything, I know, and decided to ignore the relicensing, what are the consequences?
That's a rather broad question that we're really not going to address this evening. Really here to address the river modeling and what we've studied and what it shows. There's a multiple paths that we have been following and exploring and trying to gather different information on, and each one of those leads perhaps to different conclusions. So we are not prepared. We don't have any information that we're going to share tonight on that question you asked.
Would the district consider for lack of better terms, dredging ahead of the breach of the dam and removing some of the sediment beforehand, or is that going to be you're going to just allow Mother Nature to take its course?
That is an option that has not been addressed. In some situations, dredging will be done ahead of time. In others, Mother Nature takes her course.
Anyone else move on?
First of all, can people go to your website, KLPD website, and sign up for the email?
Unfortunately, at this time, they can't go to the KLPD website and sign up for an email alert. I'm working on getting that taken care of. They can email me directly, and I'm compiling a Mousam River distribution list, updating that. I've been updating it daily, so that information will be sent that way.
If you find the sediment behind any of the dams is contaminated, who pays for the cleanup? Who gets the bill?
Those dams belong to the district at this point in time.
So it would be passed on to the ratepayers?
Unless options are taken or available funding is made available to us through grant programs.
Okay. In this new leveling, Kennebunk Sewer uses a lot of water in which to facilitate their operation. What does this do as far as Kennebunk Sewer? Are they still able to operate with the reduced flow?
It is our understanding that they will be able to operate. I'm just looking around the room because I thought Mike Boldick told me he was going to be here, but I don't see him. They would be able to operate. The district has an agreement with the sewer district on minimum flows that we're required to pass. That would be something that would be beyond our control should the dams be removed. And the sewer district has been made aware of this, and I do believe that they indicated that they would still be able to operate in their current manner.
Okay. And we're worried about, or some people are worried about fish downstream.
Yes.
What about the fish that are in the existing river now? What does the new level or the lower level do to them? Will they and can they still survive? Or now are we affecting them beyond what they can?
Those are things that'll have to be determined through Department of Marine Resources and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife as we move forward in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Can we talk dollars and cents for a second?
Not really.
Do you have any estimates if we remove the dams, what the cost would be, or if we had to keep them and relicense them, bring them up to the standards, what the cost would be?
Not solid enough to be able to give to the public at this point, and I'll tell you why. The first number that I throw out there is the first number that people are going to remember. The numbers are being refined, and there are so many different options that I really, at this point, can't put a number out there that would be accurate or we could stand behind.
Okay.
Deb?
This is an extreme change to the topography of the entire area, so I can, and I'm going to use the word assume, that it's not going to be conducive to the herons that are there, not only the fish, but the herons as well. One of the things that I enjoy watching is the waterfowl. But what about those of us that live out in that area that draw our water supply from there, and our wells are part of this? Can you see this affecting our wells in drying those out as well?
Should the district decide to remove the dams, that is something that will be determined hydraulically. We don't know what the wells along the river are associated with hydraulically. That same question will arise with wetlands associated with the river. So at this point in time, we don't know if that would affect wells or not. That will depend on whether those wells are drilled into bedrock. A whole bunch of different circumstances would be required to research to be able to determine that.
I just have a couple of questions. Senator King came to your offices, and I know the article in the Seacoast talked about the cost of the paperwork, the relicensing, and everything else. Could you just give a quick overview on that for those that may not have read it, or some of us that did? It seemed as if there is a process, obviously, to go through with a set cost by the federal government, and he was going to try to address that with respect to monies on.
In regard to that article, those numbers are anecdotal numbers that we've been told were experienced by other relicenses in the area and across the nation. Okay. The numbers that have been thrown out there for relicensing costs in and of itself are somewhere between $850,000 and $1.3 million. We have 3 facilities. The return on that investment is difficult when you have 3 facilities. Senator King indicated to us that the one-size-fits-all scenario for relicensing dams just doesn't necessarily seem to fit, doesn't seem to work. And he indicated he would go back to the Energy Committee and try to work with the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee and his Energy Committee to see if there's anything they can do to change that.
And finally, what is the process after tonight? We have an informational meeting tonight with the Board of Selectmen and the public. Are there further public hearings? Obviously, you folks will be meeting as a board to make some determinations, but where do we go from here, or where do you go from here?
We've been meeting twice a month, every month. And the board has been doing that for quite some time. I would anticipate that sometime early fall, there will be another public information meeting where we'll have more solid figures and more information available to share with the public. And keeping in mind that all of our meetings are open to the public.
Sarah, you had a question or a comment?
Todd, I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
What happens to the 14 dams beyond, once our 3 dams are gone? Let's say they remove. I mean, it seems to me the argument I've heard is that the fish wanted to go upstream, but they're going to get to Sanford, and there's another 14 dams beyond that.
I believe there's 8. I think there's 11 total. I could be wrong on that, Barry.
Okay.
We have no control over those dams above us.
Okay.
And several of them are in private ownership, so that do not generate power. And so that would be something that I believe the NGOs such as MKRA and Maine Rivers would try to work with those dam owners to restore those sections of the river as well.
The dams that are beyond the Kennebunk borders do not have the devices to actually release water. They're only for overflow. They're only for an overflow from severe rain or from flooding that may occur.
Yes.
Knowing that, and if we take out our 3 dams, and we need a minimum of, I think it's 40 CFFs, if my understanding is correctly, in order for the sewer district to function. Has the study looked at a 50 or 100-year drought and what that impact would be with those dams not being above us, being able to release the water, and whether that would affect our sewer district and what happens with that capacity for that water to be released? I don't expect you to have the answer, but I would like to at least, if it's within the purview of your board, to kind of explore that, because if you look at the climate that we're currently having, we have gone to, it's particularly this year you can see it, rather extreme climate change coming through with different kinds of events, and I'm just concerned that, 5 or 6 years out we get a 100-year drought. There's not enough water to put down there for the sewer system to function. We could have a problem from that perspective. Next question, and I'm not a fisherman, so I don't really know the answer to this. I'm just curious, is as that water, because it shows the water going from, in some cases, 16 feet or 12 feet or 15 feet down to 1.9 or 1.2 feet. At what amount of water is necessary for a fish to survive? I know when you get the water down to a much lower level, the water heats up, and the fish don't like really warm water. At least that's what I've always heard. When I used to go fishing, I did try fishing with my dad a couple times. I never caught anything, so I don't know the answer. But I'm just curious as to what kind of impact that has, and how that flows through. And another question I had, slightly different than that, but also it's really about the functional use of the river. Is that right now there are different places where someone can put a canoe in and can travel from, basically, you might say, from dam to dam. If that water drops down to 1.2 feet, down to 1.9, how can a canoe or kayak, will a canoe or kayak be able to navigate that waterway? And then again, I don't know the answer, and maybe we have to talk to some people who do a lot of, that do a lot of different rivers. They could tell us, but I think that would be important for the public to understand what happens with the change in the actual use and functionality of the river. The next question I have, well,
You know I used to be a town manager, don't you, Barry?
I got the microphone, I got the
Hang
opportunity.
on, yours are written down. Hold on. So that question I will address with Mike Bolduc in regards to the sewer district.
Okay.
They had indicated to us that there would be no problem in maintaining their license if this option is selected. I will specifically ask him that question about the 50 and 100-year drought flows and how that'll affect them. I believe that's a conversation that the sewer board district would like to have as well. Fishing, I don't fish. I heard you say that smaller flows create warmer water, which necessarily isn't the case because faster moving water has a tendency to be colder. So as we're impounding, it is our understanding the water's warming up. And I'm going to remember that last question. We don't know if there'll be a contiguous navigable channel in the river to canoe, kayak, bring boats on. Preliminarily, you can see there may be some rapids. It may be a hairy ride, but we're not sure what kind of watercraft are gonna. what kind of water? I've been down rivers like that in a canoe, and I sent the canoe packing because it didn't last any longer. But
will you be exploring options other than dam removal and/or fish ladders? I've heard that there are some other options.
Such as trap and truck?
Yep.
That's a temporary measure. Definition of temporary, we don't know. But we're considering all options right now.
Okay. Has your board been able to get any information on the economic effect, whether positive or negative, to this kind of impact, whether it to residential and/or commercial businesses for what happens to a change in the river?
That's what we're hoping to come from this meeting. This is the first time we release these photo simulations. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Barry if there have been conversations in the past. I had heard Yankee Land had been involved in some conversations. I'm not sure if that's the case. Do you recall, Wayne?
I don't recall whether Yankee Land was involved in conversations. Certainly, I think tonight's presentation will bring out further conversations on both sides, and we look forward to hearing comments from the public on what we presented this evening.
Absolutely.
Have any studies been found in relation to where this has been done in other communities around the country and what that effect has had on those communities? Do you know of?
Matt, do you know of any?
Actually, there have been a number of studies.
You have to come up to the mic. Thank you.
There have been a number of studies around the nation, and it is a change. And many people don't like changes. But will it affect the economics? Sometimes it improves the economics because it's a change in the type of recreational use. Other situations, they may actually have an economic loss because their particular use of the river is not going to be available. But to say, is it always a plus or a minus for everybody, that's hard to answer.
In looking at those other studies that have been done around the nation, do they look at the valuation impact to the waterfront homes that are affected?
I've heard it said enough. I've often been told that initially there may be an impact, but over time, those real estate values stabilize because of the nature of the river that's flowing adjacent to the properties.
So
there's no we haven't found any definitive information that there is a negative or positive impact on real estate values.
Thank you. That's great.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
On the same topic, the river goes way down, so it stands to reason that a number of the property owners alongside the river are going to have to see a growth in their property because they'll all own out to the water's edge.
That all depends on their deed. I can preface that by saying I was formerly the city manager in the city of Hollowell, and we dealt with several deed-related restrictions as to where that point ends. Some say to the thread of the river, some say to the bank of the river, some specifically lay out footage. So it all depends on how the deed is spelled out on those properties.
Interesting. I'm glad I don't have one.
Todd, if a property owner owns property on the river,
yes,
and you lower the river,
yes,
and now my embankment is sediment or contaminated, is that the KLPD's responsibility as well, or is it just in front of the dams?
That we haven't been given a determination of. That would be something that the DEP, should we decide to remove the dams, in working with the several governmental agency, Department of Environmental Protection, would get involved and let us know where our limits end.
Water holds can hide a multitude of sins from past property owners, and once you lower the water, that's all exposed.
Most certainly.
I can see it. I can just envision it up and down the river.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, we'll open it up to the public. I would only ask just a couple things. Obviously, they are not prepared to discuss rates, so there's no sense in asking questions about that. I would ask that you ask questions instead of make statements. Since this is a preliminary meeting, there'll be time to express other views, but if you have specifically questions for KLP's representatives, to use that opportunity this evening to ask a question. And if someone is up in front of you and asks the question that you are thinking of doing so, please don't repeat it. We have a lot of people here tonight, so we'd like to take care of as many as possible. So with that, do we have the sign-up sheet up there, Barry? When you go up to the microphone, you're going to have to speak at the microphone so that the people at home, and as this is being videoed, will be able to hear you. Would you please sign your name at the sheet so that we can keep track for our notes and the minutes of this meeting, which we'll have to act on at a later date.
Kevin?
Yes.
We also asked that
you're off.
After you do the sign-up sheet.
You're off.
After you do the sign-up sheet, could you also state your name, your place of residence, and any affiliation you may have?
So please come up behind me. Come to the microphone, speak into the microphone. I'll answer all questions that I can. And before people start filtering out of the room, I want to let everybody to know that the Kennebunk Light and Power District is in the process of hiring a business manager and accountant. We've got a captive audience here. Go to our website. There is an employment opportunity with the district. Pass it on to all your friends. Thank you.
No, sir, no. Questions will be only up there.
You have to go to the mic.
There will be no questions taken from the floor. It will be only at the podium. Thank you. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Gregory Mulcahy. I currently live in Bitterford Pool, but I'm from Shapley. I actually live on Square Pond, which some people may know is the source of the Mousam River, so I have some vested interests. I also am an environmental steward at Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge, serving in AmeriCorps till November, so some vested interests in that as well. I have kind of a twofold question. Many people don't know that the wastewater treatment plant in Sanford is also affiliated with the Mousam River. I was wondering to what extent that would be an effect on the downstream water quality, especially since they don't really test for a lot of the contaminants that are associated with prescription drugs and that sort of thing. They don't filter out. If anybody's interested in water quality analysis, I consider looking into that because of the tertiary treatment facility in Sanford is state of the art, but they don't, they might not have the cutting edge science behind how they treat all the water for the different drugs. So that could be an effect of removing the dams and the sediment. Also was learning about the beach dynamics, especially since the Mouse River empties out into the Atlantic and has a dynamic system at the end of it in the beach. I was wondering how the dam removal would affect the beach dynamics.
Wastewater, am I on? We really are at the mercy of the wastewater treatment plant in Sanford. So any water quality studies that would be done in conjunction with relicensing or with dam removal would have to take that into consideration. Unfortunately, at that point in time, it would be the responsibility of those upstream facilities to clean up what it is they're discharging into the river.
What relationship do you folks have with Sanford, the town of Sanford?
We all of us with dams along the river, we have a chain of calls list where if someone upstream is to discharge, they need to reduce or release a considerable amount of water in a quick manner. Yep. There's a call list for everybody that needs to be informed. Okay. Of course, we're the last three on the river. Sometimes that information doesn't trickle down to us, no pun intended. Yeah. So it is supposed to be a back and forth communication. We met about a month ago with York County Emergency Management Agency to try to reestablish those lines of communication and verify the contacts that are available and who should be calling who.
So you have no control of the level of water? Because I know the town of Sanford owns the dam or the locks on Square Pond.
Yeah, they
own. So you don't have any control of the flow above you.
Not at all. We're run of river facilities. We're not flood control. So we just have to take what comes to us.
Okay. And do you have any information about the change of beach dynamics?
That I do not, and that's something we can discuss with the board as we move forward as to further studies that could be done.
Because that would affect waterfront Atlantic properties as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Curtis Mildner, and I've lived in Kennebunk now for 40-some years. So I guess you could say I haven't lived here all my life. I am from away, but I got a pretty good background. And my question is really about for you and for the board, is what is the economic value of the dams itself? And by that, let me just make a couple points. One is that obviously no one was willing to buy it, so the commercial value isn't very high. But the dams have some value in that they generate certain dollars worth of power, okay, and then it costs something to maintain the dams. Now, I've gone to 2 meetings on the dams. I've looked at every trustee's minutes for every trustee minute. I've asked requests for information. And so far, I've not yet heard what the dams contribute net after maintenance to ratepayers each year. And I guess I kind of like to know because I have tried. I've sent emails to the board itself. I sent emails to the general manager, past general manager, and I've yet to have an answer to that question. What are the dams producing net of the maintenance costs?
I didn't bring that information with me tonight, Mr. Is it Mildner? Mildner. But I do know Sharon CC'd me on that email, and if she got your email address incorrect, I'll have to ask you to fix that. But I did see, was it Thursday or Friday, Sharon? Thursday, that information was provided to you.
That's a pretty basic question, don't you think? I mean, if you're concerned about ratepayers, it seems to me the first thing you'd look at is how much power, what does it cost to operate? And I think it's very telling that information isn't readily available. And I realize that general manager and the board have a lot of things to think about. This is an extraordinarily expensive and complex decision. But there's basic information that hasn't been provided to the public when the public is asked. And I know you're sincere about responding to comments, but I've written to the board, I've written to the general manager, and I still almost now, it's been a full year I've been trying to get that information. And I think that is very important to be transparent and complete and that has not yet occurred. So I guess I have a question that I don't feel has been answered and a comment about transparency and fundamentals about evaluation of the dam. That is, really ought to look at what it costs, what we get, and we ought to perhaps delay things that are more complex until that very basic question is answered. And I think if it is answered, the public would soon discover that the dams really don't generate a lot of value. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Terry Coldrick, and I'm here representing the Mousom River Condo Association, which is located at 1 Pleasant Street. Sorry. My name is Terry Coldrick, and I'm here representing the Mousom River Condo Association. It's 4 condos located at 1 Pleasant Street. And my question is the back of that building is 3 stories high, and the foundation is actually on the concrete barrier that comes off of the dam. I'm not sure what you call it, but our foundation literally sits on that concrete barrier. And if you drop the river 13 feet, 12 feet, and if the sediment moves, what's that going to do to the structural integrity of our building? And if it does something, if it's determined, who pays for that? Who's financially responsible?
I honestly can't tell you who is financially responsible, but I can tell you that those are studies that would have to be undertaken should the dams be decided to be removed, because we do have a responsibility for the infrastructure that we have, and the lack of that infrastructure that causes issues would more than likely be borne by the district.
And the other thing, obviously, the financial impact of having bought, looking at the pictures, going from 14 feet to 1.2 feet, and I have been there for almost 8 years and have watched the river go down to watch the bridge construction, maintenance on the thing, and I have to tell you, it smells unpleasant when it's down, and if it's going to be weeks, it's unpleasant, and also, you know, again, back to the property values, and I know that you said that that's a future meeting, but looking at the photos, 2 to 4 years, and what that does to the property values, particularly there are a number of people on Pleasant Street that are concerned. Also, just an observation on the folks that have mentioned the pollution. When they have taken the river down, I have seen microwaves, tires, radiators, that there should be some really interesting things as the sediment comes out of there. And I also have another question as if, in looking at the pictures, the mud banks that are there, if the sediment is contaminated, what are we looking at for vegetation to fill in, which obviously is going to make it a more pleasant looking environment? Is there concerns that it won't vegetate because of the pollution?
That we haven't been able to determine yet. That's why we're having this conversation, so we can take all these considerations back and see what kind of information we can bring forward to you. It would be a natural infilling of the river, potentially with natural vegetation. Not too many invasive species would get in there, but they have a tendency to be able to propagate faster than other vegetative species, but that really can't be determined at this point yet.
Thank you.
My name is Phil Parker, 125 Ross Road. I'm a member of Site Review Planning, the former chairman of the Shellfish Board, and a current member of Shellfish. Something else to talk about. We have clam flats on the Mousom River. As far as site review, we're talking about future demand on the sewer system. Route 1 South is now sewered. As the town grows, there's going to be a greater need for sewerage. And I know this talk about a seaward outfall. It's expensive, but long range, it cleans up the river. Agunquit does this now quite successfully. Their sewer pipe is about 2 miles offshore. As far as the clam flats, just a little bit of history real quick. 10 years ago, Kennebunk's clam flats had been closed for 40 years due to pollution. We successfully reopened them, running a winter program where the flats are only open in the winter, because we know in the summertime when the tourists are here and people have their cottages, we have a certain amount of overboard discharge and the river is polluted. John White, I don't know if he is here, has been doing testing, and I think our board should talk with the power company, because we have a lot of data. There used to be a flow meter at the sewage plant until the 2007 Patriot storm that took it out. We used to measure the flow, and it's interesting because according to our records, the ebb flow in the Mousom River is the third week in September in the lower river. There is currently a flow meter at Witcher's Mills that was put in 2 or 3 years ago where there is measurement of the flowage in the river. But the bottom line is that when the current administration in Washington came to power, they increased the water quality standards in the country that right now we cannot put enough water down the Mousom River over the clam flats to operate our program. In removing the dams, that might change that, and or having a seaward sewerage outfall. But running the program, I mean, this was for Kennebunk residents. We had a reseeding program. It was pretty dynamic, and we would love to bring that all back. But we have to put more water down the river over those flats to meet federal standards of water quality. Because we have the, in our board, we have the infrastructure to do the water testing. We have something like 36 stations that we test every month between the Kennebunk River and the Mousom Rivers all the way down to the Little River. So we're, clams or mollusks or oysters are a pretty darn sensitive measure of what the environment's doing. And obviously we don't want anyone to get sick from eating steamers, and we never have. But we're so concerned about the water quality, but right now we're between a rock and a hard place because with the dams and the river system as it now exists and the standards that we're required to meet out of Washington in the DEP, or environmental protection, we cannot put enough water down the river. So, but I would love to share the data with we have a lot in writing and with Department of Marine Resources.
I'd greatly appreciate any information that you can provide to us, because we will look at any sources of information that we can gather.
Somebody brought up about property values. I'm a retired appraiser, real estate appraiser. And that's probably the best thing you can do is, if these events occur, is have your property appraised. So, thank you.
Thank you.
The question is, when and if can we put enough water down the river?
We can only send you as much as Mother Nature sends us.
I'm Steve Hines. I live in Cumberland. I'm with Trout Unlimited. We have 45 of our members who live in the watershed. I'd like to speak for them and like to speak for the trout. Just, you know, a lot of the concerns and questions that have come up so far, I think have set the tone for this meeting. Just would like to kind of level that out a little bit by saying there have been huge, by comparison, dam removals on the Kennebunk, huge dam removals on the Penobscot, and all of these things that are scaring us so badly did not cause adverse effects in those locations. So I just wanted to kind of start off by saying that before I ask my question. A few months ago, I went to a meeting in Westbrook. It was about the Sacarapa Dam, which SD Warren has decided to give up their license on, and they're going to remove the dam. They were looking at building a fishway to help fish get up over a riffle in the situation there, but now they're looking at a natural ramp to get fish through there. But the meeting they had 3 months ago had a whole different tenor. They're farther, downstream, so to speak, and it was enthusiastic for what the potential of the river was for recreational fishing, for canoeing, for kayaking. We've talked about, what happens to the river. It's only going to be 1.5 feet deep. They build these dams on hard places, on natural riffles, and those are going to be the shallowest parts there. But there's still going to be deeper parts, in the river. One thing I can guarantee you is if you do take a canoe out under the present circumstances, when you come to one of these 3 dams, you're going to have to portage around it. There's no doubt about that. When those dams are gone, you're not going to have to do that. But I guess my question is, are you in contact with SD Warren? Are you in contact with the town of Westbrook? And just, it seems like they've gone through the same process, and they would be able to provide you with some help.
We will reach out to the SD Warren and the folks. We have done a lot of research on several different removals. I'm familiar with the Edwards Dam removal because I worked in that area while that was done. So we will be gathering that type of information and reaching out to people that have been through what it is we're going through.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks for having this meeting tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Hines.
Please sign in, Mr. Hines. Thank you.
I'll sign in. I'm Bob Gerard. I live at 21 Pleasant Street. And my first question is, how long is the license good for if we were to renew the license? 30 years. Okay. And the cost of the license over 30 years, what I've heard is 1.5.
That's a ballpark that I threw out, yes.
Okay. That would be per dam.
No.
For all 3.
For all 3.
$38 per person for 1 year, per customer, spread out over all of the customers for Kennebunk Light and Power. $38. I'll pay everyone on my street. My next question is, what's the cost of the cleanup? Has anybody got an estimate?
That we do not have.
Okay. I've worked on Superfund sites where we've had to go in, and this was out west, but we've had to go in and millions upon millions upon millions of dollars have been spent cleaning up sediment. Drain tracks were brought in to clean up sediment. And that's a cost that I would encourage you to see. Even if you don't renew the license, what's the cleanup going to cost? And then from a
you just move in front of the mic.
Oh, sure, sure. And from another economic perspective, I grew up on the Penobscot, so I'm compelled to stand up and tell you my experience, which is I watched the town where we removed the dam disappear. People didn't come to town to canoe. People didn't come to town to have a picnic. Old Town Canoe shut down and they moved away from the water because there was no longer access. I have an engineering background. I've seen a lot of dams retrofit with better generators. So have we explored that option? That's a question.
Yes, we have.
Okay. Even if it's a small percentage, and we're talking about habitat for fish and habitat and ecosystems on both sides, and I believe in both. But I also believe that there is a habitat for the citizens of Kennebunk that needs to be supported for those who enjoy it. And I live on the water. I know what it looks like when the water goes down, and there's not a gradual slope. Dynamite, something, made a 10 to 12 foot ledge right at the back of my house. And I know that that's not going to be an enjoyable spot for my family. So I would implore anybody not just look at these pictures, but go up where the dam isn't and see what these deep spots reveal. Because there's an impact there. And the reality is we have these dams now. The cost to keep them might be much less than taking them out and cleaning them up and paying for the cleanup. Even if the financial impact of keeping them or the benefit of keeping them is minimal, it might be a lot less than having to clean up what I have seen cleaned up in other areas of the country. So I can only speak from my own experience, but once a town has, I'll tell you, the pavilion that went in this winter has brought new life to the town of Kennebunk. And I don't think, in the wintertime, and I don't think anybody would like to see that disappear. And I'm afraid to see what will happen if I don't watch people come into the boat ramp and put their canoes in. If we don't see people swimming in the Mousom River. I can tell you what happened to the Salmon Club up in Brewer. It used to be a great boat ramp for the public to use, and now it's shut down, it's potholed, and the windows are broken.
Whoops. Vertically challenged. My name's Teresa. I have Coastal Maine Kayak in Kennebunk Lower Village. You can't hear me? Not surprising. My name's Teresa Willette. I have the kayak shop in Kennebunkport, Coastal Maine Kayak and Bike. And I use the Mousom quite a bit for some of our tours, not all of them. And I know paddle boards are coming in. And my question is, on this study that was done, did it include the tides that go up and down the river? I know I depend greatly on the tides, and a lot of people that paddle depend on the tides and take those into consideration, and I was wondering if this study included that.
I'll have to have Pat answer that question. The extent of the tides up the river, Pat?
Pat, sorry, microphone.
I'll share.
Teresa, make sure you sign it.
I will.
The tides were not considered because the tides do not, the influence of the tides do not go up as far as the Kennebunk River, as the Kesselin Dam.
Okay, but they would.
No. The range of the tide is further downstream from where the Kesselin Dam is. So removing the Kesselin Dam would not affect how far upstream the tides go. So therefore, we did not have to factor in the influence of the tides.
Oh, and to answer your question, canoes and kayaks generally, depending on how much weight are in them, only need about 6 inches of water. And I have seen a lot of wildlife up there, a lot more than that was mentioned. So they are coming back, which is awesome. Thank you. I couldn't sign in because I couldn't find a pen.
There's a pen right at the top of the podium.
Ah, my glasses are on my head.
Hi, my name is Kevin Flynn. I'm a resident of Kennebunk and I've lived here about 30 years. Spent a lot of time canoeing and kayaking and swimming in the Mousom River. And it's certainly one of the reasons I moved here, or at least picked where I live now. And a couple things I wanted to ask. One is, right now, the studies that you showed that showed the height of the water, those were, I think, from approximately a dam level.
Yes.
So the 17 feet or whatever is what it is, like right at the Lafayette Dam.
Yes.
So what I want to know is, does your study show how far upstream till you get to close to where the river height is going to be when the dam is actually gone? Because as I know, when you go from Mill Street down to, I've paddled from Mill Street down to Route 1, and the first section I get on all the way down to below the turnpike, and a little ways below that is certainly wild running river. It's quite canoeable. It's a lot of fun. There's some really good rapids there, and a very lively river. And then at some point down there, depending on how high the water levels are, it starts to back up. But, you know, do your studies show, you know, yeah, there's more of an impact right here on Route 1, but it doesn't really show, you know, what's going on further up.
Pat, I'll have to have you field that question. She's going to step right in behind you, Mr. Flynn.
No, our study did not look at that. Our study was limited to very specific cross-sections where we actually spent the effort of collecting the survey data that shows the river bottom. We have not gone out and looked at other sections of the river. We did, based on FEMA data, identify the width of the river, but FEMA data is used for floodplain mapping, so it only shows the shoreline. So it did not help us understand the bottom of the river. But more surveys can be done to examine other sections of the river. But right now, we only did 16 surveyed cross-sections.
Yeah, I'd suggest people take a look at that section up by the turnpike, and you can see what the river's going to look like after many years, or maybe 3 or 4 years after the dam is gone, because that's not affected by the dam. It's real easy to get over there and take a look at that. And then the other question is, I think it's 2011, there was a study done by Wright Pierce on the safety of the dams and the age of the dams, and what kind of condition they're actually in. And I don't believe that study has been released to the public, and I'm wondering why, and or maybe it has been, where is it? Because I think that's kind of key to this whole discussion. Are those dams safe? What kind of maintenance is needed? And, why wouldn't that be released to the public?
We do maintain those dams in a safe and stable condition. FERC considers those documents critical energy infrastructure, and those are confidential, so we don't release those.
I'm sorry, why are those confidential? Why is the issues about safety confidential?
They give us the layout. They give the layout. They give you all of the tie-in points, and it's considered a national security issue. And FERC has determined you can petition FERC if you'd like. To try, you could petition.
So FERC doesn't let you release that? Is what you're
FERC
saying?
does not let it. FERC does not let us release those.
Okay, but as far as just a summary of the safety of the dam in terms of longevity and that sort of thing, is that information you can release?
I can let you know.
A summary of the report.
The summary is that all 3 dams are stable.
For how long? Whatever.
That I can't tell you. Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is John Burrows, and I'm here from the Mousom and Kennebunk Rivers Alliance. First, want to note that there were so many questions earlier, particularly from the Board of Selectmen, that myself and probably 10 other folks in the room could answer. And so I think I'd recommend at some point having some kind of workshop along with KLPD to talk about things from property values to impacts on shorebirds and herons to the different water levels. There were so many questions that came up, and we've got a lot of expertise, not just locally, but in Maine on dam removals and river restoration, that we should be able to tap into those resources. We've had 40 dams removed in Maine, large and small, and I think we've had that expertise, and we've offered that assistance. Thank you. And we'll continue to offer that assistance to KLPD and other folks in town. A couple of questions I just wanted to ask. And one actually is just response to what Mr. Flynn just said. Any of those documents in terms of dam safety, in terms of the critical energy infrastructure, those are allowed to be released to the public. Basically what happens is a citizen will petition FERC to ask for those. FERC will then ask the dam owner if it's okay to release that information. So ultimately it's up to KLPD to say yes or no. So that information could be released to the public. And I think the larger question is the Wright Pierce report from 4 years ago had a lot more beyond just integrity of the dams. There was stuff related to long-term costs of maintenance operations, a lot of questions which we've heard folks like Kurt earlier ask about in terms of the basic economics of these dams. And I think getting that information out in the public in a timely manner is really, really crucial. The MKRA has analyzed all of the publicly available information in terms of the economics of the dams going back for decades. We'll release that information in the next couple of days and give it first to KLPD. But in terms of what we've seen, based on all the information, the dams in and of themselves, economically at this point in time, are barely breaking even. If you need to do anything in terms of relicensing, fishways, or anything else, the profitability is gone on those dams. That doesn't mean there's no reason you might want to keep one or more of those dams for public or social reasons. But ultimately, you need to get to the question of, does it make sense for the ratepayer to maintain these dams given the little bit of power that they generate? And given that, given the fact that the dams only generate between 1% and 2% of our power, I'm wondering why there's been no talk about just energy conservation and energy efficiency. If every customer in town saves the 1.5% to 2% on their power bill, there's no need for the dams. That's one thing we'd like to see within the cost-benefit analysis that KLPD is going to be doing with Wright Pierce later this year. Right now, that analysis is looking at a situation of dams versus no dams. We'd like to see that be much broader and looking at energy efficiency, energy conservation, the solar initiative, and some other stuff. And lastly, Todd made a comment that earlier about FERC potentially choosing to maintain jurisdiction over the dams. And so that raises the question of the work that KLPD has been doing to look at getting out of FERC jurisdiction. I'm wondering if you're prepared to talk about that avenue, which you guys have been working on with your attorneys and are prepared to talk about that. Because I think that's something the public should be aware of as well.
At this point, our attorney has told us that that is not a conversation that we have with the public until such time as we have the information that we're required to have.
And do you have a time frame for that information?
I would hope within the next few months.
Okay. Well, I would hope that once that information is available, it will be released to the public. And I'd also implore the board of KLPD that this entire public process go through to the end until you get the feedback, go through the next steps before taking any action to petition FERC to get out of jurisdiction. I think doing otherwise would sit fairly badly with a lot of folks in the community. I realize it's an option that would save a fraction of the cost of the money available or the potential outlay, but I think it's very important to push that forward into the future and wait for the public feedback, make a decision and say, okay, then we'll do that and not rush to judgment on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
My name is John Paletto. I live at 70 Fletcher Street. I live upstream from the Route 1 dam. Live between the roundabout and Kennebunk High School. And the Mousom River flows right by our backyard. I have a question for the engineering firm. I've watched the river during various storms, a lot of rain coming down. And even though the river swells in width, it seems like the current, like past my house, doesn't seem to be made too much more swift. I was wondering, do the dams help to contain water flow, water currents during the storm? My concern is if the dams are taken out, I realize we're going to have a much smaller river. But during a very severe storm, would there be a lot of water runoff into the river? And with the dams being removed, will a tremendous amount of current be generated, maybe reconfiguring the shoreline, causing some more erosion, which I haven't really noticed with the dams being in place. My question is, the removal of the dams, will it affect the shoreline, the configuration of the river during a severe storm?
We would actually have to do a lot more study to be able to identify that for different sections along the river. I will tell you, in general, Mother Nature does affect the streamline, the shoreline, but exactly how much and where, you would really have to do some additional modeling to understand that. These projects are run-of-river, and what that basically means is whatever Mother Nature is throwing in the river has to be passed downstream. They're not flood control. Kennebunk does not lower the dam in order to hold back water to reduce flows. That being said, does the dam affect the velocity? I really can't answer that question. I'm not a hydrologist. Some additional studies may be able to answer that question. But I can tell you that, in general, more water moves faster. So the more water you have in the river, there's going to be some pickup of velocity. That just sort of hydrology works that way. But how it's going to affect different sections and different areas, additional studies would have to be done.
Jim Sante, I live in Kennebunk. I have canoed almost the entire stretch of the Mousom River that we're talking about. And as far as how much water is going to be flowing down through there, if you stand on the Route 1 bridge, you look downriver at the rapids, that'll give you a real good indication. Sometimes in the spring, when it's really running, it's a real wild ride down through there. Later on in the summer, when the water's down, you can't walk down there and not get your ankles wet. My question is, on the license renewal, is it a condition of the renewal that fish ladders be put in or some way of passage?
We do believe that will be the case.
Okay, so the cost of a license renewal would not be $38 a dam, it would be $38 plus the cost of a fish ladder.
Yes, sir.
Approximately, what would the cost of a fish ladder be?
Wayne, you...
The reason I ask that is I have heard that if you're required to put the fish ladders in, it would be as much as 80 years before the payback would equal out the cost.
It's one of the reasons why we don't have numbers here tonight, but we have been told by Fisheries and Wildlife that you can count on approximately $50,000 per linear feet for the height. So if you have 15 feet of the dam, 50 times 15.
$300,000, give or take.
But the problem with that is, and some of this was addressed back in July, and we're not very further along due to some illnesses on my part, but you can't just say, well, then the cost of a fish ladder says we ought not to do something, because as was mentioned earlier, what if you increase generation, and what is the cost of that? And if that's a benefit, and you don't know what the cost of energy is in 2022, how do you figure that out? And those are the kinds of steps that the board is now getting deeply engaged in and is going to develop answers for, and we'll be sharing all of that information hopefully before the end of 15, certainly by the middle of 16. They've got to have that information before any notice of intent is filed.
Thank you.
But that gives you an answer, and depending upon the kind of fish ladder you put in, the cost varies.
Hi, my name's Patrice McCarran. I'm a resident of Kennebunk, 54 Brown Street. I'm also the executive director of the Maine Lobstermen's Association, so I guess from a personal perspective, my family would love to see the dam removed. We love the river, we tube in the river, we swim in the river, and we pretty much only use it below the dam because it's just seems a little dangerous to have the kids in and out, so I think it would be great. From a professional perspective, the Maine Lobstermen's Association has supported dam removal statewide. We found that it really does benefit the alewife run statewide. Alewife is a very sought-after source of bait. It's a local bait, so it's much safer for our fishermen to have local alewife, local herring fish like that, rather than needing to import baits, which is something that we need to do right now. So it would be very beneficial for us.
Patrice, do you know when the last time we saw an alewife in Mousom River?
The only data that I've seen is from the Maine Department of Marine Resources. We had a real expert who's since retired. His name was Lou Flagg, and I know that he's on the record in the mid-'70s talking about the Mousom as being really one of the most strategic rivers in southern Maine to potentially bring a healthy alewife run back.
Bob Worthner, Kennebunk native, the Maine Sierra Club. I'm representing them. Todd, a question. I understand the public meetings and the public's role, but after that, the board votes. Does the public then get a vote, or what's the process? Now, let me just tell you, I read not yours, but the May 14 newsletter, and it seemed to indicate that no matter what the board's decision is, it will go to a public referendum. Is that correct?
My understanding of the process is the only necessary public referendum vote would be if bonding is required for any of the decisions that the board makes. So there is.
If we chose to sell, we would have to.
Or sell, yes. Sorry, Craig.
So
there's no statutory requirement for any decisions other than money borrowing or, as Craig said, disposing of any of our assets that are required to go to a vote.
So the 4 or 5 person board will make the decision?
Potentially.
Potentially?
Well, the people elect those.
What I'm trying to find out is what's the process? Is the role of the public simply public meetings and sending you emails, or will it go to referendum? And it sounds to me like will not, unless you have to.
Unless we have to borrow or sell.
Borrow or sell.
We are extremely interested in your ideas, concerns, and that is going to factor into any decision that the board makes. There are a litany of possibilities that we have to really understand and see what are the ratepayers and the community going to be able to afford.
Okay, and it sounds to me very clearly that the 5 person board will make the ultimate decision, unless you have to borrow money. Is that? Okay, thank you.
Craig, can you afford to license the dam now without bonding?
I don't understand the question yet.
If you had to come up with, or the Kennebunk Light and Power had to come up with $850 to $1.5 million, could it do so without borrowing, without bonding?
I'll have to ask somebody else to answer that question.
Yes on the lower number, no on the upper number.
Okay, so there's a chance that it would go to public vote anyway, possible. That's all I was trying to establish. Thank you.
Good evening, Joe Hardy, Wells. I've paddled and biked, and not biked, but skated and swum and a number of things on the Mowsum, and written a couple local histories of Wells, which is, I think you know, the Mowsum was in Wells for a century and a half before we gave it to you.
They took it.
You gave more than the river.
But my question is, I did a study for the state about 30 years ago on rivers in Maine, and I was a consultant for the Department of Conservation. And at that time, I was recommended multiple uses for rivers. I think over the years, I've changed my opinion on that. I mean, hydroelectric power seems to be certainly a renewable energy source and something that has its place. But it would seem these days there are a lot of drawbacks, and I know you're going to evaluate them. But I'm wondering, I've heard a rumor that you're seriously considering solar energy. Is something that I'm reasonably knowledgeable about, and wondering what the status of your research is on a solar installation, and whatever the status is now, what additional work do you plan to do to investigate that option?
We've spoken with several different firms in regards to different size solar arrays within our district. What size we can handle, the land available to us are things that we are considering. None of those options have been brought forth in a manner that would be cost effective to the district that we're aware of, and those entities that we are working with, we're trying to get those costs more in line with what the district would need to be able to use it for replacement power. But it is something that definitely the board is looking at.
Good. I'm glad you're looking at it, but I would have to question the preliminary results you've received, because from my understanding, and I'm a personal owner of solar arrays, and I've worked with the town of Wells on several projects, that my guess is that you'd find it's very cost effective. And so I would encourage you to sort of continue your research and and expand your information base.
If you don't mind, I'd ask you to reach out to me, and I'd like to further this conversation with you if you have that experience.
Well, I'm not an engineer or a solar expert, but I have some information I'd be glad to share with you.
I would greatly appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Peter Hoff. I live on Store Street, and my property goes down to the river. And I moved here from Kennebunk Port about 5 years ago. I've spent a lot of time on the Kennebunk River, and since I've moved here, I've spent a lot of time on the Mousom River. I find that the Mousom River, as it is above the dam where we are, has quite a variety in its ecosystem. And part of that spills over onto my land where there's a little marshland that comes off the river that I suppose would disappear if the river level were dropped. There's all kinds of animals and plants that are living in that. And what I would like to know is, are there plans to study the existing ecosystem upriver from the dams, as well as the hypothetical changes that would happen as a result of removing the dams?
That's a matter that's been discussed at the board level. I don't know if the board would be initiating any further conversations in that regard. It sounds like the MKRA folks could definitely help you with some of that information to answer some of those questions, and maybe that is a greater conversation that we would have to have in a workshop to find out exactly what kind of information they have available. And ultimately, there is a lot more information that we need to gather. And this is the reason for this meeting. And as we come from this meeting, that'll be a discussion I'll have to have with the board to see if there is a need to do further studies on the existing ecosystems.
Thank you.
Just for timeliness, how many more people would like to speak? Just four. So 2, 3, 4? Okay, what I would like to do, if at all possible, probably be 9:15 to end this, if it's possible. I don't want to cut anybody off, but I just wanted an estimate of it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Landis Hudson. I work for Maine Rivers, and I'm very happy to be here and happy to see so many people interested in thinking about the future of the Mousom River. It's been a pleasure and I guess a certain challenge to get to know the history of this river. And I would first say that the challenges that you all are facing are not unique to this river, quite familiar throughout New England. The river has a tremendous and powerful history of rich ecology. It has the challenges from its industrial past, and it's really up to all of you, hopefully working together to decide what kind of future you want for the river. And I would say that you also have an added responsibility because these 3 dams really break the important ecological connection from the ocean to our freshwater systems. Having no form of fish passage and knowing that this river does have a history of diadromous species that need to move from freshwater to the ocean back and forth to complete their lifestyle. So at this point, it is a loss, an ecological loss, a social loss, and something that I think needs to be evaluated. So that's kind of the larger picture that I'm here to tell you that you have a beautiful history, and there's certainly a lot more ecological potential for the future, and I hope you'll take time to look into that. A simple question. I know that a lot of these river restoration questions involve a great deal of time and energy to understand the vast technical and permitting, hydrologic and other questions. Todd, you've been on your job for 2 months now. Congratulations, you're looking good. Glad to see it's going well. How much time and energy are you spending on this? And what is the budget for the next 2 years? I know that many costs are difficult to put a number on, but I would think that would be.
Time and energy in the 2 months that I've been here, I would say between 30 and 40% of the time is being brought up to speed, learning different aspects of this whole process, doing research historically into what's been done. The 2-year budget I couldn't give you at this time. I don't believe the board would have the ability to hedge that guess either. That is a question that I am not aware of at this point in time, but it is something that we are working on as we look at long-term budgets. This is going to be a big part of what we do.
Hi, I'm Merton Brown, the town clerk of Kennebunk. I feel compelled, because we have such a captive audience, to let everyone know that there is there is an open seat on the board of directors for Kennebunk Light and Power. You will be electing a trustee on June 9th, and if any of you are interested, and I hope you are, you would come and see me and get 25 signatures, not more than 100, and then you can have as much fun as these folks are having over here. Thank you.
Merton, you will be holding.
Thank you, Martin.
Merton, you'll be holding office hours at 9 o'clock tonight.
That was a public service announcement.
Merton, I have my papers right
Tough act to follow. My name's Monica Graben. I live in Kennebunk for the last 30 years. And I heard people expressing concern about sediments, and I do understand where that would be a real concern. But over the years, talking to people at the Wells Reserve in particular, I am just as concerned about the water quality in the Mousom right now. Yeah, there are fish in those impoundments, but most of those are not native fish. They're bass and, warm water fish that would not normally live in that river. And I'm no expert on this. I used to fish all the time. Bass are not what would normally be in a free-flowing river. And to me, although, yes, the sediment is an issue that has to be dealt with and the way the river would look, to me, to have what are the natural species for that river and also to improve water quality. So my question is, what is your understanding of what the water quality is in terms of, dissolved oxygen and just the health of the water in that river?
Have you done any research on that, Pat, as you go through the process?
Well, I would say a good resource for that is the Wells Reserve, who have done a lot of water monitoring and water sampling for both that and the Kennebunk. And I went to a presentation once by them on the Kennebunk River, and I was shocked. This place that everyone, it's so beautiful. It is not a clean river. So I know that the Mousom I'm serious, I know the Mousom has similar issues, and that is another part of the puzzle. And, we want to protect what we have, but I want what we have to be worth protecting, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Graben.
I was just going to add that studies, if in fact the projects were to be relicensed, that significant water quality studies would be required to be done. We've already had some preliminary meetings with the Department of Environmental Protection, and they've already identified what types of studies. So certainly that would be something that would be done.
Hi, Arlene Poisson. I'm also a member of the Conservation Commission. I just did a quick, after listening to a lot of these comments, I just did a quick, summary, based on what I've heard tonight about the value of keeping the dams versus removing them. And just what I've written here is, and I'm certainly not a scientist on these things, but my sense is that keeping the dams, the river course remains fairly constant. If the dams are removed in heavy storms, rivers naturally find new courses, and that's that could impinge on people's private property, going downriver and at the beach. So that would have to be a possible anticipation of removing the dams. Keeping them, there's no fish passage right now, and I believe there should be fish passage for a healthy river and a healthier ocean, which really needs all the help it can get. My feelings is probably going to be increased maintenance costs. Those dams are over 100 years old, most of them. Gosh, I mean, I don't know what their lifespan is, but at some point they'd have to be replaced if there was an intention to keep them. And that's a significant cost on top of the relicensing expense. So keeping them, there's increased maintenance costs. Removing them, no maintenance costs. It is a renewable energy source, but a very small one compared to the total budget. And I wonder if we couldn't replace that existing energy source with looking at tidal energy. There are places researching tidal energy. There's contaminated sediment, which likely won't be removed if we keep the dams. And if they're removed, a good part of that would be removed. I'm certainly in favor of removing contaminated sediment. Currently, there is canoeing and kayaking, and there would continue to be some canoeing and kayaking. The water quality, based on anecdotal evidence that I've heard at the commissions, the water quality is not good in that river, and I would imagine there would be a healthy improvement with removing the dams.
Do you have a question, Arlene?
And what's that?
Do you have a question?
No, but I want to state these comments.
Well, that's what we don't want. So you can ask a question or let someone else come
All right,
to ask a
my
question.
final note is, could we consider adding a river walk if the dams are removed to improve enjoyment of the rivers for town citizens? And that's it.
How many more people wish to be heard? 1, 2, 3.
Please. I'd like to go home tonight.
Okay, 5 more and that will end it.
My name's Ward Ford. I work at Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge. My name's Ward Ford. I work at Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge. And I came across this thing from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that says that they have requests for proposals to restore and sustain healthy forests and rivers, and they appear to have a lot of money to do that. Here you go.
Good evening. My name is Jacob Amon. I live in Wells, and I also work for the Wells National My name is Jake Amon. I live in Wells, and I also work for the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve. We were mentioned earlier, so I thought I'd better come up and just put in a couple words. First, thank you to the Board of Selectmen and to the KLPD Board for holding this meeting. I think that it's incredibly valuable to your community, and I think that hopefully you're going to get a lot of good information out of it, and we look forward to hearing more about your process as it moves forward. For those of you who don't know, the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve is just down the road. We encourage you to come by and see us anytime. We are a scientific and education organization. We are not an advocacy group, and I'm not here to advocate one way or the other for your decisions. However, there are a number of issues that have been brought up this evening upon which we could provide information to KLPD. And in 2013, we explored the possibility of working together, and unfortunately, that didn't work out. But if during this process you're interested in reaching out to us and trying to get some of the information that we have, we'd be happy to share that. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Spell your last name for me, please, Jake.
A-M-A-N. Yep. I'd be happy to ask a question if that's the requirement for getting up to the microphone.
Yeah, this time is not, it's not a comment session. This is a question and answer. If
Okay,
we could.
here's a good question. When is there going to be a comment session?
That's why he has an email. Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
KLP will be hosting that session at their building.
So my name is Shiloh Schulte, and I'm a Kennebunk resident. I have a question. It has to do with the organizations or people you're working with to do. You had mentioned earlier that about fish surveys of what fish are there now versus what fish would be there, and so forth. Is anybody looking at the Kennebunk River, or is a planned survey to be done in the Kennebunk River compared to the Mousam River? Because we have essentially a side-by-side comparison. The things aren't going to be exactly the same, but we have a relatively free-flowing river in the Kennebunk, and we have one that's dammed in the Mousam. So you could do I would think, a fairly easy side-by-side comparison. I personally have, and speaking to the issue of, you mentioned earlier herons in front of your house and watching those and how that might change. I mean, I've kayaked the Kennebunk from Downing Road all the way out to the mouth of the river and then over out to the mouth of the Kennebunk River and then over into the Mousam. And you can do that if you do it at the right time of year. And it's really quite interesting because it is a free-flowing river. You do see amazing wildlife back in there along those channels, and it is much like we were just hearing described earlier. A much narrower river. It's faster flowing. You see your pools, herons, hawks, kingfishers, everything all through there. It's a really interesting river. But as Monica had said earlier, it does have its own contamination problems. If we can clean that up, as well as cleaning the Mousam up, or cleaning the Mousam up would be a good start because you assume there's going to be similar contaminants in both. I guess I'm wondering is who are you working with to do those surveys to look at? I'm a biologist myself. I work for a different nonprofit, but I'd be curious to hear.
Thus far, the only meetings that have been held prior to my arrival is with Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Department of Marine Services, and in U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, Pat. We haven't secured the services of any individual or private biologist at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it would be interesting to see because there's definitely a lot of talent out there in that particular. I don't happen to work with fish all that much, but I know people that do. So anyway, thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate the meeting.
Hi, my name's Tim Summers. I'm a resident of Kennebunk and certainly an advocate for a free-flowing river. I am also a construction professional and understand sometimes the first estimate is always the one that sticks in everybody's mind, so I can appreciate that. But I would ask that the board and Kennebunk Light and Power, being an entity of the town, be open with everything that they have. Including cost-benefit analysis, because the information that I've seen through my, months of, following this issue is that these dams are just not economically viable, especially when you need to license them and add the fishways that would need to be added even if they weren't required by some federal agency. It's the right thing to do for the town of Kennebunk, because in the end, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the town of Kennebunk is Kennebunk Light and Power. It is an entity of the town, so everybody that pays taxes in the town and everybody that pays the rates is an entity. So my question is, can some financial information be available on your website or via email showing the information that you have to date on cost-benefit analysis? I know you know how much power you produce. I know you know what it costs us to sell that power. So can that information be distributed to everybody in town so that they can?
I can't give you a date certain, but that is what we were working towards.
Okay.
And keeping in mind that the board has been pretty diligent about what they're doing. I came on board 2 months ago. That's something that we're working to get out there to the public as we go through this process. I understand it has been a long process, but we are getting closer to information that could be available to the public.
Thank you. I'd also ask for some information on cost-benefit analysis with the solar or any other renewable energy that might be able to fill the shoes of this dam. So I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alex Mendelson. I'm a resident of Kennebunk. I have a background in human ecology, which essentially, in a nutshell, is we change the environment, and then how does the environment change us? We have an ecosystem that some residents have mentioned, which seem to me to be very circumspect. They're worried about some small area of wetlands, perhaps, and that they see on their riverfront property, but we have to look at an ecosystem that extends way beyond just the river. We have a decaying Gulf of Maine. There are a lot of serious ecological problems with the Gulf of Maine, and the river is an essential. The rivers, not just the Mousom River, but all the rivers are an essential part of that ecosystem. My question is, you've mentioned upstream fish passage, but not all species, to my understanding, prefer using fish ladders. Only some. Some do not like fish ladders. They don't like being trucked around dams. And the more important question I have for you is, what about downstream fish passage, which is essential to the ecosystem? I'm not talking about a little ecosystem in the Mousom River. I'm talking about a global ecosystem that involves the Gulf of Maine and our two rivers. It's larger than just a small snapshot that we're talking about here. It's a much more global problem. I've noticed that at Libby Cove, the ocean acidification has caused an influx of jellyfish, and I'm talking to fishermen and lobstermen. They can't get bait because the alewives can't make it up. As far as the studies that have been done at Wells Reserve and the volunteers who have done a lot of studies, that have there's a tremendous amount of information available, especially from people like Jacob Ammon and others at Wells Reserve, about what kind of fish make it up to the Kesselin Dam and then are frustrated because they can't go any further. Okay, enough statement. My question is, what about downstream fish passage? How do you account for fish fry? How do they avoid the turbines? I know you call them turbines here, but I'm from away, so we call them turbines. Turbines were always something we wore. But, but how do the fish, the baby fish, the diogenes fish, how do they make it downstream without getting crushed in the dams? And if we improve the dams by improving the hydropower capacity of the dams, what does that do to the downstream fish runs? I beseech you to look at the larger picture. I know it's easy to say, well, I'm a property owner, I have to worry about my frontage or my taxes or my deeds, or you have to look at, each one of us has specific interests that are economic. And we're dividing the pie into many different disparate pieces that may or may not come together. But sooner or later, we have to decide what to do. But I ask you to look at the larger picture. What we need is a vibrant, natural river flowing through Kennebunk. You'll have more fishermen. They'll spend money at the hotels and restaurants. You'll have a source of a low-cost bait for the lobstermen, which they don't have now. They have to import it from offshore. It's bad enough that we import everything else from China. But we have an opportunity here to create a vibrant, robust river. But please, I'd like to know what plans Kennebunk Light and Power District has if you retain the dams for downstream fish passage.
My apologies for the semantics, Mr. Mendelson. When we're considering upstream passage, by default, we're considering downstream. I did fail to mention that, so I do apologize for that. Downstream fish passage is a consideration that has been looked at, many different options, which would be overtop spillways, possible mandatory times where we need to shut down the turbines so that the fish can get through. So I apologize for not mentioning that, but that is part of the consideration that we have been. One of the options we're looking at downstream, for me at least, always goes hand in hand with upstream. I apologize for not clarifying that.
I take a look at Stephen Hawley's book about some of the river restoration in the Pacific Northwest. Any place where river restoration has occurred, property values have gone up. I think we have 2, if not 3 studies that we could present to Kennebunk Light and Power that have been done in Maine that show that property values of abutters who are on the river go up, not down. I think there are 2, if not 3 studies that prove that. And as far as the economic ripple effect, fabulous ripple effect. So keep that all in mind. But I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This will be the last question.
Hello. My name is Rick LaRiviere. I'm currently serving as the Vice President of the Saco River Salmon Club and Hatchery based in Biddeford. And we do a lot of work with habitat all over the Saco watershed. And I just wanted to come up and to say that we've witnessed firsthand the changes that happen in the ecosystem when dams are removed or barriers are removed. And things happen very quickly as far as the restoration of the habitat. And to follow up on what the gentleman was just saying about fish passage systems, we're currently involved in a shad passage study that took place last year on the Saco in the at the Springs and Bradbury dams when they drew down the head pond and opened the gates to try to let the shad pass through. Of course, there are fish passage systems at both of those dams, and also at the Cataract West Channel Dam there is a 500-foot long Daniil fish ladder that is not serving its purpose. So I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the fact that not all fish passage systems are created equal, and some of them are not as efficient as they should be, and sometimes, like is currently happening right now, Brookfield Energy is having to look at constructing yet more expensive fish passage systems because the systems they have at Springs and Bradbury are inefficient to pass shad. And not all species do use the same fish ladders. Sometimes you have to have multiple types of fish passage. So I just ask you to consider that when you're making your decision. I was going to ask a question, but somebody stole it from me. But I just wanted to come up and put that, add that to that.
Do you have anything final, Todd, before we return?
Welcome people to reach out to me. Once again, my email address is tshay@klpd.org. You can feel free to call me at the district offices or make an appointment and stop by and have this conversation. Stay tuned to our website for more information as it becomes available and more meetings that we will hold in the future.
Could you provide your phone number one more time? It was difficult to catch it earlier.
It's 985-3311.
Wayne, do you want to close your meeting? And then I'll close
A
this.
couple of people asked about having a comment sessions. We welcome comments at all times, and you can email them or telephone calls through. So that would be the best way to get your comments through to us. Thank you all for coming tonight. Appreciate the participation and the interest in what we're working on. We will keep you informed in the future as to what we're doing. Thanks again.
Take a motion from the Board of Selectmen to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Opening day, 3 days.
They got it.
One day.
You say who's pitching?
One day.
Hey,
Tanaka-san.
I was out of the